greetings, it's only all Paul friends welcoming you to Starfleet Universe On Call. Yes, I only have one hand this time because in the other hand, I've got a cat. Yes, see, little kitty here, who is all cuddly and so forth. And the question is, how long my Cindy co-host will be with me tonight? If he's nice and calm and doesn't move around a lot, well, he'll stick around. If he starts attacking my headphones, then he's gone. Because I need the wires. Come on, really? I have problems enough with them, with the kitties. Yes, you. Chewing on my like my Apple AirPods and any other cables I've got, and all of a sudden I have to replace the cables. Not because the cables have gotten old, it's because the cables have gotten chewed up too much.
Sometimes the cat has been on like a back shelf there and jumped all the way onto his shoulder. A young cat.
Mm-hmm.
Erica approves the cat.
I'm sure she does. Because kitty can be very quick.
She's just walking by and like gave a little heart sign with her hands, going ah, and now she's gone.
Goofball. But anyhow, time to get onward and forward to the topic for the evening, actually, which is something which Gary actually brought up, which is he figured it was a good idea. Oops, wrong one. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. That is to go back in history because we actually had some renewed interest in SFB Online. Sorry, the SFB, the Federation Commander ADB's products. I'm not sure what has done this, but it has been of interest as of late. Which a lot of people are coming back from the yesteryear. Maybe it's because people are retiring and like, I used to play Starfleet Battles. It's a great game. I love that. A lot of fun. So Gary, not Barry, recommended. Why don't we introduce these people that haven't been in the Starfleet universe for years? Because there's a lot of products, a lot of expansions, a lot of modules that they know nothing about. And you are, can you get comfy? Sorry, I'm talking about my cat again. So I figured what I could start off with is something which is relatively simple. Actually, this is probably the second episode of doing this, and I apologize that these are sporadic and not really planned. Invariably, another more pressing topic comes up, and I'll hit on that one. But okay, that's it. You're going. Apologize. My cat started to attack my finger, my thumb. He was starting to attack my thumb. And I'll let Jeff to join us in this happy scenario, talking about Federation Commander and the beginnings of which. Don't mind me. I am right now going to. There it is. Voila. Okay. Going to. Wow. Well, that's one thing I should keep a copy of them. Starfleet Missions. I'm looking at this. It says Starfleet Missions card game was printed once, is out of stock, and it will not be revised. It's like, okay. So, for those collectors out there, get a copy of Starfleet Missions. I'm not sure. I forget if I still have a copy or I gave a copy to Doug. But I know I had two copies. One actually I got from Sean. Sean. He used to be on the podcast a lot, many years ago. He hasn't been on the podcast for a while, but he sent me a copy of Starfleet Missions, and also I happened to find my copy of Starfleet Missions, which is an interesting game.
Is that the one that came with 2 decks?
No, I think it came with one deck. The whole idea was that it was Starfleet mission that you have a ship that you're going out for a mission. Now, to be honest, I don't remember all the rules and so forth for Starfleet missions. I just saw it mentioned that Starfleet missions was printed once and no longer in stock. They didn't produce a revision, and they don't plan on making a revision either. And I can understand that.
Well, if it doesn't make money.
Exactly. If it didn't make money, and the cards were these cardboard cards. Not really the good quality cards from like Starfleet Battle Force. Well, none like that. So
right.
So I can totally understand why we don't have those. Why not can we do it? Because, to be honest, I don't think it was that fun of a game. I honestly did not play it, but from my understanding, it wasn't that great of a game overall. Starfleet Battle Force is I like that. I like that game. Now, tough part for me is that Starfleet Battle Force is an okay game. The tough part about Starfleet Battle Force for me is that with Starfleet Battle Force, the cards are beautiful. It's a good, quick game. But I'm used to playing tactical board games, so it's nothing like that. So, it's not good. But anyway, actually, let me look at see if we have that here. There's the Starfleet Marines. This is Starfleet Battles. Yeah, that's all Starfleet Battles. And because while we're talking about it, I might as well look it up and see if we have any. Okay, I don't see the Starfleet Battle Force mentioned because that's one of those ones that was produced, and I think they still have copies of the first run of Starfleet Battle Force. Actually, I'm confident in saying that they made one. There it is, Starfleet Battle Force. This was Starfleet Battle Force. For those who never heard of it, was actually published. Yeah, Mike, I agree. Mike in the chat room was just mentioning how it's a game that had with some potential, but never quite got warp speed with me. Basically, it never really caught on to him, and I can understand that. But Starfleet Battle Force was originally published in 2001. They actually, if you looked at it, was actually, in my mind, the more interesting part about Starfleet Battle Force instead of the game itself was the packaging. Because I remember talking to Steve Cole about this product. And that was what?
Yes, the hubless VHS box.
Right. The different pieces that they put together to put this together. One is the VH box because actually they mentioned that the video box in the description, but also finding the little star things, that's used for marking off the damage. Finding those, and basically trying to make it, because the most expensive portion about the game was, of course, the cards. Big surprise. And everything else. So they were trying to make it as cheap as possible to make these items. So they found a video box, which like, okay, that fits nicely. You can fit the two decks, because you have two decks, into the box. You have enough room for the little small copy of the rules, because they're not very large. And then these little star little things. I don't have them with me. If I would have known I was going to talk about Starfleet Battle Force, I would have grabbed my copy.
They're threaded beads, is what they are.
Mm-hmm. and they have a little Ziploc bag of these that they put in the box. And I forget, did they include dice?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. I thought they.
You need dice. You need dice for the PF and fighter and some
Planet.
of the
Planet-based fighters. Yeah, planet-based fighters. Yeah, things like that.
it,
Yeah,
it's it the the heritage of the game going back to Avalon Hills and Naval War
right.
is very, very strong.
Yep, that's what Steve Cole mentioned that he kind of stole it from. Now, according to the update page, they had planned on Starfleet Carrier Force, Starfleet Strike Force, Starfleet Invasion Force, and Starfleet Planetary Force. They were never scheduled. Future expansion for Starfleet Battle Force not on schedule. So those are the possibilities, but those never came actually into being. Now, if you want to, after you get a copy of the game, you can actually add cards to it because there's a lot of playtest cards both on the website that you can print out. Now,
There's a Lyran and Hydran cards pack that they actually produced, although the cards themselves don't have rounded corners.
right. And they have other ones, I think, from Monsters. I thought there was one that might have been a Planet. But
there's a planet. There's a star-based card which is oversized, and there's a planetary-based card. There's been a number of various PDF-style cards they've released over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these are all playtest cards, which they never actually produce an updated product that includes these. So, but Starfleet Battle Force, as I said, if you're into okay, when it comes to Starfleet Battle Force, let's go back because it was produced in 2001. What's the one thing that was happening in 2001? Magic the Gathering. And Steve Cole, what he was doing was he was producing a product which was juxtaposition to Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering, as most people know, that Magic the Gathering is a collectible card game, which means
otherwise referred to as cardboard cocaine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very nice predatory system that was around for a while before then. It was about 5 or 6 years old
it was.
at that time.
It was.
Really
it was loot boxes before loot boxes.
Yeah, and at that time frame, it was hitting its stride in the convention circuit. Very popular. They were having huge tournaments for big money back then. Yeah.
Oh,
it's still around today, but I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole personally.
Oh, agreed.
I wouldn't touch it with a 3-hex tractor beam.
It's one of two games that when I first saw them, I was instantly turned off to them for basically being a predatory kind of system setup thing. And oddly enough, when I was introduced to Magic the Gathering, I was on my way to play a round of SFB with a friend at a rec center at Fort Hood, way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
There's that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but yeah.
Kind of cashed in on the collectible card game genre.
Right. It was a juxtaposition for that. Basically, the idea was that you have a card game that you never, ever, ever have to buy another thing. It's self-contained. You don't have to buy more cards to play. You don't have like a starter deck, and then you have to buy more to get the cards you want, and buy more and buy more and buy more, and just suck you dry. Now, the one thing that did happen because of Magic the Gathering that sucked dry was the board games. A lot of board games which was the thing at that time, got killed because of, at that moment in time, as I said, board games was the thing to do. And all of a sudden, these collectible card games come in, and then, you got Magic the Gathering. Then, of course, after Magic the Gathering came in, you got all of these other card systems that come into play. It tries to compete with Magic the Gathering. And what's the biggest issue with that? Is that who does it hurt? The dealers, the people who are selling the games, because of they buy. What card system do you buy? Other than Magic the Gathering, because they're all saying, "Oh, we're gonna beat Magic the Gathering at their own game." We're gonna be more popular. So you gotta buy our card system. And the problem was with that, because this is pretty much pre-internet. When it comes to when people didn't buy many things on the internet at that point in time, if they bought anything, that those dealers would go out of business. So it was.
They'd buy a couple of cases of some unknown system, thinking that they get on the ground floor and buy Bitcoin at $30 a piece, and then come to find out later that the system never found an audience in the local area, and they're stuck with the inventory. There was a number of systems like that, and you're absolutely right. It became pot luck for somebody's like, okay, you can either deal with Wizards of the Coast and deal with a known issue, or you can do everything else. I think the other side of it that really killed the rest of the board gaming is that you could teach somebody how to play Magic the Gathering in the simple form path possible in 15 or 20 minutes, and you could enjoy playing for an hour or two. Whereas with Starfleet Battles, you pretty much have to spend a couple of hours showing them what to do, and then you have to let them see how to play over a weekend before they even get anywhere close to the point where they'll have any fun.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regard, I think Starfleet Battle Force was a laudable goal in order to help reduce the bar to entry.
Yep. I agree. And the thing is, of course, what came after the collectible card games kind of crashed the market. Euro games. A lot more of these games, which were no longer, because really, in my mind, before the collectible card game craze, most of the games out there, most of them anyway, were tactical board games. That was the big thing. Whether it was, soldiers, on ground, fighting that way, or it was.
Well, there was tactical like Advanced Squad Leader, and then there was strategic like most of the things Avalon Hill did.
Right. And then there was just
the three big.
Yes, go ahead.
The three big things you have, and I would use Origins as a good example of it, is tapped into the current of the nation at the time, was you had a wide variety of board games in the wargaming side that a common denominator was they were rules intensive, and you really had to be into that particular niche to get into them. And then you had the miniature wargaming, which was a large wing of Origins, actually. And then you had the role players. And the one allure of Magic the Gathering is that it could suck somebody out of any of those, or prevent them from going into it, because they get started on that and they just have no interest in anything outside of it, which is kind of sad in a way.
True.
But True. That's a whole phenomenon all by itself.
Agreed. Agreed. Now,
In
fortunately,
that time frame,
yes.
in one thing about that, in that time frame is you see a transition from the hardcore grognards who love, like, TSR's Gleam of Bayonet system or any rules heavy thing like War in Europe or Advanced Squad Leader, towards the Euro games over a few years where they're less rules intensive, which is another, a thing that hurts the board gaming is how it was in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Sorry,
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, because to me, I was never into RPG, so I played RPG when I was, a little bit in college and right out of college. Then I stopped playing RPG, and finally stopped playing Starfleet Battles because I couldn't. I get tired when it comes to Starfleet Battles, which was I was the guy who called up everybody, and I would try to get it together for everybody. Okay, when we're meeting, where are we meeting? Who, what is it? At Greg's house? Is it my house? Is it, is it in Jersey? Is it in Pennsylvania? Where is it? But anyhow.
Spent all your time and effort organizing and none of it playing.
Well, we would play it, and the problem with Greg was a gastroenterologist.
Pretentious windbag.
And the problem is, even every time we were playing, he was on call. So invariably, what would happen is that he'd get a call. We start talking about tactics and what we're playing. So we'd have a good time talking about the game, but we'd stop playing the game.
Yeah.
It's like the point is to be here to play the game. And I can't blame Greg because I know being a doctor is not easy. Jeez. The thing is, I gotta look him up one of these days because it's been so long. I used to go all the way to Bucks County, is where he lived, which was interesting because I still remember leaving his house a couple of times and started driving down the road, and there's a whole herd of deer sitting right in the middle of the road. So I just kind of stop and just wait. So, anyhow, moving onward and forward. Fortunately, a few years after Starfleet Battle Force came with the help of Ken Burnside, who was he worked for ADB for a short period of time. Really, I love you, but no.
Oh dear, space monster attack.
Yeah. The large zinni.
Warm up the probes.
What kind of probes? Yeah.
The scientific information gathering probes, of course. We're talking Starfleet battles. Get your mind out of the gutter.
Ow, 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 ow. Ow. Put his claws right into my knee. That did not feel good. Okay. But anyway.
You need to teach your cat that they're only supposed to eat after 3 days. Yeah. Sorry.
Don't let the kitty promote to a prime team.
Okay. I will not. What? But anyway. Okay, just stay up here. Goofball. But anyhow, Ken Burnside worked for ADB for a little bit, and before he left and went at Astra Game, he created his own game company at Astra, and created his own game. And I'm not sure honestly, I'm not sure how well his gaming stuff does. If he's meaning, is he living off that, or is it kind of a side hustle like Daniel Cast when it comes to Star Armada? Because Star Armada, I know for Daniel Cast, is a side hustle. He sells the games. He gets a profit off selling the games, but Yes, Kitty. Um, but I know that he has a side gig, and he just like me. Sometimes his that sometimes the day job, which earns the money so he can actually live, pay for food, have a place to live. They don't matter things like that. Really. Um, can you just find a spot? Excuse me. I'm wrestling with my cat. Just stay still. Okay, but anyway. So.
Oh, the Philanites.
So in 2005, Klingon Border gets published. And this is the first edition. Yes. Excuse me for a moment. I love you, but it's hard to hold you while I'm doing this. Okay. And that is, it gets published in 2005. It's the first edition of Federation Commander. It has a few cards in it. Obviously, it doesn't support that many weapon systems. It's mainly the core, which is Federation and Klingon. And according to that, I'm just looking. I thought there was.
In its own way, it was a call back to the original Pocket Edition with the amount of material it gave you to start with.
Yep, agreed. And then soon after that, in next year, they produced Romulan Border, where they actually, obviously they added the Romulans and the Gorns, the plasma torpedoes, all of that. And finally, they produced Romulan Space. It says here. Okay, the Romulan Space was a copy of Romulan Border, including only items not duplicated in the Klingon Border. The idea is that you get Romulan Space if you didn't want to get duplicate stuff, basically. And Klingon Space, and then there also came the Academy, which is a low-cost introductory version of Federation Commander. So this is, if you know anything about Federation Commander, currently they have what's called, let me look at this for a moment. I apologize. I do not see it. Yeah, I don't see it. Okay. That is, I was looking for first missions. And I don't see first missions actually specified here in the list. And
I think first missions is the giveaway for them. I think
right.
You can download that off of ADB for nothing.
Right. That's what I was wondering, is because you got the Academy version, which is low cost, has it's available as an ebook, but you still have to purchase it, which has more of the rules than the first missions. First missions has very slimmed down version of the rules. I'm mentioning at the news portion. So if you're want to listen to the live, you don't know the news portion. But first missions is idea is that it gives you an introduction into Federation Commander, so you can see how the rules are, how the system goes. And I think for anyone who's interested, especially if they're a Starfleet Battles player, that is interested in Federation Commander, get a copy of First Missions. It's free, and now we'll let you understand how the rules are different than SFB. And I'll admit, just like when I played at Gamers of Winter, had a minor issue, of course, that I'm an SFB player playing Federation Commander, which I forget that, oh, you know what? This might be a beautiful, beautiful, positioning. You're right where you want to be. Problem, you're on sub-pulse 2, and you got 2 more sub-pulses to go through before you can actually fire. So it's like, oh, so that totally screws it up. And I still remember that at that moment in time, also, I was out of power, or very low on power. I forget which was. It was down to 2 points of power or completely out of power. So I couldn't, cancel movement because it costs you movement, costs you power to cancel movement, which is interesting. The whole idea of canceling movement is weird. Because you really think about it, it makes no sense. From purely a logical perspective. Now, I understand why they have it. You have cancel movement in Federation Commander, i.e. the ability just to pay for the movement cost of that movement and not move your ship. Totally understand that. From a game balance perspective, it makes sense. But from a normal perspective, when it comes, if you ever played Starfleet Battles, it makes no sense whatsoever. Where you can, according to Chris, think, oh, it does make sense. You manipulate the warp field slightly. The idea is that you kind of make it so that
I think that the disconnect you're having there is that the Starfleet Battles universe was founded around the idea of a plotted movement with quarter-turn interfaces where you reset your plot. Federation Commander never had that because by the time Federation Commander came along, plotted movement was something that was not done by basis of the rules, but was done as an odd entertainment for the people playing because it was simply too hard to keep up with for most players.
Mm-hmm.
Since you're dealing with the fact that everybody is going free movement and Federation Commander brings in free power allocation for all intents and purposes, then what you end up with is you have a situation where you've got the power to use. Why not use it? Well, just because you're not setting things up the way you want them to do doesn't mean you're not going to be completely inefficient with your power. It's kind of like a jet fighter pulling a subsonic side slip in order to let slip some of their forward velocity rather than overtake somebody.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Chris was mentioning how he wished he could pay a point to cancel hex movement once per turn in SFB. Now, there has been, if you want to make it akin to SFB, that is that's the one thing that was discussed actually in the discussion board, if you're way back many years ago. I forget when it was. I'm willing to bet it was like 10 years ago that they were having this discussion because it was right after FedCom came out, which is the idea of taking some of the rules that were made for Federation Commander and bring them back into SFB. And one of those ideas was actually paying to change your midterm speed plot. But currently, in SFB, with midterm speed plots, you only can increase your speed or stay the same from the previously plotted speed. You can't reduce the number of hexes that you move. Now, that was one of those things that actually the whole idea was brought up because you could still, the whole idea of a midterm speed change, but you'd pay for reducing your speed, which means you would actually have to spend the same energy that you do for increasing to decreasing. Now, to be honest, as an Andromedan, I would have loved that because that's another one of those things that you like to do to use up those batteries, suck them dry, and have it so that you can then do a panel dump, and voila, nice clean panels. It's a nice thing. Now, moving forward, there was a graduation actually that has a copy of Academy and a copy of the Klingon Border. The rulebook was replaced, had a revision as of, the latest revision was actually 2011 for that. They have the different attacks, the Klingon, the Romulan, the Tholian, and the battleships attacks were released. Now these were basically additional ships and different additional scenarios for those, for Federation Commander. Like Battleships Attack. Battleships Attack is an interesting module in that until that point, at least I'm pretty sure I got this right, until that point, all the ship cards were very small. So I'm grabbing one of the cards. I don't have the large ones with me, they're downstairs. But they all were this size. A nice little 6 by 8. I think it's about right. I think that's the correct size.
About like an A5.
8.5? Okay. Wasn't exactly sure about the size. This is a Voodar. This is a Dreadnought. Interesting. Ooh. 45 power. A few ion cannons, a few phasers and IPGs, all kinds of fun stuff. Turbo D, 1.5 moon class, big surprise. And of course, lots of shuttles. And then you want a really small ship. there's the Dreadnought, but that's fleet scale, which is half the cost. And half the weapons, of course.
And twice the hassle. Half the cost and twice the hassle.
Really, don't get that's not.
It's like filtered cigarettes. You're sucking twice as hard for half as much.
Yeah, let's not discuss the whole issue with squadron versus.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, and how that didn't work. Which I've already. Anyone who's been on this podcast long enough will know that I've already had that. I've mentioned that multiple times. So.
Yeah. Yes. Those of us that have experienced the discussion before understand it's one of your major MacGuffins.
Yeah.
Of course, at this point, we might as well promote it to Captain or to Colonel MacGuffin.
True. Yeah, and they. Okay, hold on. Can you move? Thank you. Uh-oh, he's gonna jump on top of my back. Urgh. But now the cat's crawling across my back.
Yes, Chris, that's about what it's good for. Is it's to provide the cadet scale game ships. Yep,
agreed. But there are other ones that came out all the way up to coming to like the last release of a product from ADB when it comes to a full product. And I'm not talking about booster packs. It was in 2013, which was reinforcements attack. I.e., mainly just more ships because they had transports attack, which is a good thing because transports attack. The one thing to focus on that. Can I help you? I love you, but you make it hard to talk so people can understand me.
Well, yes, you're not paying enough attention to the kitty.
Okay, kitty. I love you. Ah, whoops. Hold it. Don't mind me. Come on. There.
Please stand by while we deal with these technical difficulties.
Yeah. In this case, the cord from the headphones actually got wrapped around his paw. So, mostly these were ships all the way through 2013. So for 8 years, it was expanding the product, and then it paused, and the next scheduled product actually was Federation Commander Fighters Attack, planned for fall of 2015, and guess what? That didn't happen. And that's fine, because I personally, honestly, and I've said this before, which is I honestly think that Fighters Attack is, not particularly my cup of tea. That's the one thing I really like about Federation Commander. There are, I was about to say no fighters. There are some fighters, very limited, mainly to the hydrants, which of course anyone who knows SFB.
If you try to take the fighters away from the hydrants, it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, agreed. And
it's like trying to take the drones away from the Zenti.
Oh, that won't work at all. Yeah, well, in theory, okay, the hydrants, in theory, you can fight the hydrants without the fighters. But the thing is, when it comes to that, sorry, Gary. I didn't mean to dish you. How you doing, Gary?
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Good. Getting back to my point. In theory, you can have the hydrants without the fighters, but that leaves out a whole, half the fleet of the hydrants because of you need the Hellbores and the mixed Hellbores fusion ships to actually have a viable ship without the fighters. Usually the fighters, you have a full squadron when it comes to fusion just fusion based ships that have just fusions without Hellbores. Obviously, some of them do have Hellbores, but when it comes to the original, going back in the time to when the hydrants first started, the earlier ships there was no Hellbores yet. The Hellbore system had not been invented. They just had the fusion beams. But in addition to the fusion beams, to improve the amount of firepower, they had fighters, and that was how they got along. And that's how they actually were able to fight and attack and so forth. But with those ships, you can't fly those ships without fighters, because you're just reduced when it comes to the amount of BPD that they're actually worth. That was actually the funny part was that I was on Facebook. I think it was last week, but recently, and somebody was playing SFB, and they were playing the heavy battle cruisers. Some heavy battle cruisers when it comes to the Klingon, the Federation, and they had this. I was looking at this going, what the heck? Which was they didn't do a heavy battle cruiser for the Hydran. They had a regular cruiser, and I'm going, BPV Wallace, that does not make sense. So I'm figuring the person actually had all the fighters for that cruiser, because without that, he was dead. BPV wise, it wasn't going to add up. So to me, that was interesting. And both Chris and I we're not fans of fighters, and the big reason for me that fighters, especially adding them to FedCom, the big issue I have with adding fighters to FedCom is this, and that is it adds the one thing which most people will find, which to my mind that makes them unbalancing, which is if you get all these fighters which can launch all of these drones, all of a sudden you got these ships. The carrier ships become these just awful weapons that they launch their fighters, because you can launch one squad per, I think it's per impulse or every other impulse, but the squad is made up of up to 6 fighters, if I recall correctly. I'm trying to remember the rules off the top of my head. And so they launch. That's the one thing that I read through the rules that are in the captain's log, or was it the community update? I think that's I forget which. But anyway, I read up and there was it didn't specify whether the fighters could be at the beginning of the game could actually be pre-launched, and flying outside the ship when at the start of any scenario, or that it needs to be on the ship before the scenario begins, and then they're launched as part of the scenario. I did not see anything in the rules talking about that at all when it comes to the beginning of the scenario, when it comes to the fighter's location. Now, of course, I have not looked at that when it comes to the shuttles, because in theory, you can actually have shuttles launched in Federation Commander, but my guess is they're always on board. But the fighters are different. They're attack craft. Shuttles are not designed to be attack craft. But anyhow, and that given that also that amount of firepower that the fighters introduce into a Federation commander, which has no way to deter it, no way to fight it off, short of running, and hopefully you run out the 3 turns that the drones exist, or 2, phasering them down. There are no wild weasels. There are no T-bombs. When it comes to a large flight of drones, it is tremendously hard to knock them down. And that's the one thing that the fighters introduced to FedCom is these larger waves of drones. Or in the case, you can also have a larger wave of plasma torpedoes because of course, the Romulans and the Gorons have plasma torpedo-armed fighters. But anyway. And of course, one of the things that happened in those years, and actually they even had a new booster pack that they released back in 2020, which was booster pack number 37 and 38, which is basically these booster packs. The whole idea of the booster packs now, I still remember this one, which was booster pack number 91. And Leanna really fussing about that booster pack. The reason being is that booster pack, I think it was booster pack number 91, I think it was 91, was a booster pack which had all unique ships. The whole idea of the booster packs is that the idea of booster packs was to get more copies of the same ships that you previously owned, and you might get a new ship that you didn't own before. But it was a lot of older the ships that already were produced. So you just get duplicates. So it was cheaper to produce those booster packs with the duplicate ships than it is to have the unique ships. So you didn't want to have a booster pack that actually had all unique ships, because it's costing more to do that. Oy, Iggy, oh Iggy. Iggy was saying that he doesn't understand FedCom. If it was supposed to be SFB light, why do they keep adding more complexity?
Because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's true.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
To be honest, if you hear how ADB tells it, or says it anyway, FedCom is not supposed to be SFB light. Though, of course, everyone, when it came out, that's what everyone was saying, that it's SFB Lite. But AD kept on saying, no, it's not SFB Lite. But if you look at it, it kind of is. In my mind, it is SFB Lite in that the idea is to reduce the number of rules, and all those explicits that were in SFB rules made them in. The idea was to write the rules so that they were implicit. So logically, you could come to the same conclusion as all the explicit rules that were written into SFB. Which is fine, and I think it works out quite well. And I'm glad a lot of the stuff they reduce when it comes to the rules for the weapon system, and some of the weapon systems definitely they simplified the weapon systems. Do I think? Do I think that some of the weapon systems got kind of nerfed? Yeah. Of course, then we have things like the ESG. ESG was not nerfed, it was transformed. The ESG, when it comes to FedCom, is not the ESG of SFB.
Yeah, and a lot of SFB Laren players see the Federation Commander rules for it and start whining.
Agreed. Chris. Was that Doug?
Not everybody takes the neutering well. So.
Oh, understood. How many years has it been now since they came out with the Captain's Edition? Because that was like 99, correct?
Captain's Edition of Starfleet Battles was like 92.
92? That old. So it's only
roughly.
So it's only been 30 years that I've been.
30.
Yeah. There's the 30
I
years.
remember buying basic captains in 1992 with money I made from a side job at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember going into a store to buy a copy of the SFB, and all of a sudden I see the Captain's Edition. Like, Captain's Edition? Whoa! I bought the box edition of the Captain's Edition. It's like, oh, cool. To be honest, I don't remember what store it was. It was some store in some mall. That's all I remember about that whole incident.
Well, it helps. I should point out, I mentioned this sometime in the previous podcast, but there is a page on the ADB website with the update list, which basically tells you every year that a certain printing or reprinting or revision has been done for a rulebook or for a module or a product.
Yep.
And it says that the Captain's Edition of Basic Set was first printed in 1990, and then it was revised in 94, 99, and then the SFP book was revised in 2000. And then there was another revision in 2011, and then the rulebook itself was revised in 2012 to match the new the silver anniversary master rulebook that was released that same year.
Yeah.
But actually, just one thing is I guess I only came in because when you were in the middle of talking about the hydrants, but just a couple of things. One is there's certain empires that I think it's reasonable for them to have a casual carrier doctrine as part of their identity in the game system. Like for example, the Soldra, they can't work without the black shards to use as for vampirism against enemy ships.
Understood.
The hybrids are dependent on their barb fighters and so forth. So, and actually, even for the hydrants, it's worth bearing in mind that when the ADB went back to the 3 early years modules, it's worth noting that the W and Y era hydrant ships have no fighters. They simply have regular ships, and they either use Nova cannons, which are basically Nova cannons basically kind of like the prototype of the early years prototype of the fusion beam.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a handful of ships in Module Y2 and Y3 which are giving a weapon called the Helga, which is like an early prototype of the Hellbore, but I believe it doesn't have the 360-degree damage that it does. So, but also the weapon was lost for the most part after the first conquest of Hydrogen Homeworld. So there's basically different ways, and actually, if you jump forward to the era of X ships, yes, the Hydrogens do have Stinger X's, but they also do have a number of ships that are light on fighters, and also because of the way that the X-Pulse phaser and the limited Aegis work, the X-Aegis works, so that fighters are less useful against other X ships, but of course they are useful against the Andromedas. So there's like a difference in terms of like what the fighters are going to be used for. But when it comes to Federation Commander, it's worth bearing in mind that we're getting the gunboats first, and I'm fairly certain that the gunboats are going to be added to quote unquote vanilla FedCom. So they're going to be basically part of the default set of ships and rules and empires that everyone can play and use if they wish. And X ships, well, they haven't said for sure, but I suspect it'll probably be the same thing as an SFB, where if both players agree to play a game in that time period, then they can have X ships. So it's basically you're not springing an X ship on somebody that doesn't already have it. Because it's the same sort of thing, because remember, Fed Commander very strictly blocks, breaks up the different timeline compared to SFB. So you don't have, like, for example, in SFB, you might have a transition period between the middle years and the General War, where maybe 3 or 4 ships in a squadron might have a refit, but then the refit's not universal, and then maybe only 1 or 2 of the ships have another kind of like, capacitor for the ESG or something like that, whatever. Whereas in Fed Commander, it's like, nope, you either play in the early years, or you play in the middle years, or you play in the modern era, or presumably when the X ships come out, you'll play in the era of, I guess they call it the Andromedan War era or so on. And similarly, when X2 comes out, there'll be some sort of thing. But then, when it comes to fighters attack, it's quite possible that they might continue. They might leave non-Hydron, or I suppose for the Omega project, non-Hydron shoulder carriers. They might basically do it. Like they might say, okay, A, you can only have one at a time, and B, they might make them Borders of Madness in the sense that they'll be strictly optional. So no player would be able to basically put down like say if they make the Federation Strike Carrier, whatever they put on the table, like basically both sides would have to agree to use it. So the actual ability of these units to kind of like take over the game system would be relatively limited. And I mean, there's precedent for that in SFB as well, because like in the Lesser Magellanic Cloud, only one of the 3 LMC empires uses fighters, and they're very strict rules saying that you can only have 1 carrier on board, and the carriers themselves are limited to the number of squadrons they take. And so, yes, the carriers can throw out a lot of firepower, but by the time they're doing that, their homeworlds have been conquered, and they need that firepower to try to keep the Andromedans from, erasing them from existence. So the actual, they're not affecting the domestic wars that the LMC empires are fighting before the Andromedans came. So in terms of the balance factor, it's managed to a greater extent, if that makes sense. So because it's actually interesting to know, because even in SFB, the fighters that they have in the LMC all have a dog rating of 0, because none of them were designed to fight each other. They were designed to be launch platforms or mass drivers to shoot out Andromedas. So, what was it? Yeah. So basically, when it comes to Fed Commander, I agree with the idea of putting most carriers into Borders of Madness territory. Now, I wouldn't be too much bothered about, like, say for example, the Federation Light Carrier, like the modified Galactic Circuit Cruiser that has 6 F-18s. I think maybe allowing a player to take one of those to basically play the Darwin scenario. I don't think that would be the end of the world. But then, of course, you'd have to have the ship card for the demonstrator battleship to try and stage after it. But when it comes to regular Fed Commander play, I think we're still quite a way away. We released 2 additional products because I suspect that X ships will be after gunboats and then fighters will be after that. There'll be plenty of time between then now and then to have state these kind of play test these ships and have these arguments played out, because yes, the swarm and squad flight rules that are in Communique 127 or whatever it is, I mean, they're not the final rules, but I don't think it would be wise to make sure that they actually don't try to take over the game system, because no one wants that. I mean, maybe the most rabid Cincy player might want to have their drones take over the game system, but I mean, that's already a problem in the general war era, because they have so many more drone launching ships than everyone else. So, but I don't know if it's worth reaching panic stations just yet, and I also don't believe that it's necessarily fair to basically treat a Fed commander as being less than because they took away wild weasels and G-bombs and stuff, because I don't know if we're there yet in terms of seeing whether or not panic stations need to be reached in terms of the fortification of fighters' attack whenever that actually happens. So again, maybe it's because, I mean, for me, I guess I'm more personally invested in the Fed Commander. Not to say that I'm not invested in SFU battles as well, but I'm very much of the view that FC is very much deserves to be treated on its own terms. And if you try to play FedCom like SFB light, your ships will get blown up, because even just the things like the shield reinforcement and paying twice to fly backwards and so on, like some of the basic mechanics of the game, and also the fact that you're limited in terms of the impulses that you can fire on, because you still have 32 movement soul pulses, but you only have 8 opportunities to fire within them. Whereas in SFB, you can be more, I guess, Mizia-y in terms of
granular,
how you're basically, granular. Even for things like the way the PPD works, because the PPD in Starfleet battles is engineered with the SFB firing system in mind, so that you've got Pulse 1, Pulse 2, Pulse 3, Pulse 4, and so on. Whereas Fed Commander, by necessity, had to change that, basically turn the PPD into a sledgehammer rather than a sandpaper. But I don't. Again, there's other pluses and minuses and so forth that feed into that. So, but actually, I will say one other thing, because again, I don't want to take too much time up here, but I actually think that some of the FC isms for certain SFB weapons would make interesting variant firing modes for Module X2. So, for example, I think it'd be really interesting if, say, Lyran X2 ships, in addition to the standard, quote-unquote, standard ESG, if they so choose, could do you could call it a burst mode, and the burst mode basically works the same as in Fed Commander. Because if you think about it, the weapon is called an expanding sphere generator, but in SFB, it's a hollow sphere generator. But in FC, it actually is, the sphere is expanding from the ship. It's attacking everything that's in the same hex, and then it goes on to the 6 adjacent hexes. So I'm not saying to take away the firing modes that exist, or the operation modes that exist in SFB. But what I'm saying is that I think it's not a terrible idea. It might not be a terrible idea to raid the cookie jar in terms of new and additional tricks that they could help make X2 and SFB something unique. And that has the benefit of being that when Fed Commander gets X2 ships, they don't need to reinvent the wheel, because those systems already work that way.
Understood. I agree that that FedCom actually bring some of the stuff back into SFB could introduce different ways of thinking about things, different modes. For example, second generation X ships might have the rule that was so eschewed 10 years ago, to actually be able to slow down using power. The mid-turn speed change and using your power to actually slow down your ship, which I think would be a great additional thing that could be just for second generation X ships, and the same thing for some of the weapons modes that that are in Fighting Com, introducing those as part of second generation X ship weapons. If they're going to stick with the same kind of weapons, obviously there's still some systems that are probably going to be modified or added or something as part of second generation. Now, obviously, I know that ADB has their own ideas on what they're going to do, and so anything we say here, it doesn't really matter much. But I can see them doing those kind of things when it comes to second generation X ships. Now, when it comes to the fighters, well, we'll just have to wait and see on the fighters because of course, one reason I bring up the fighters and the issue with fighters is my battle group I had to fight. I'm fighting against a bunch of fighters. They were allowed into the battle group, and as an Andromedan, I had to figure out a way of fighting against them and have it so that I still survive. So basically, most of that, the tactics for for the double nickel captain's log. How's it going? I don't know. But anyway, when it comes to that scenario, most of my phasers were just going to be sitting there and plowing down any drones that got launched. That was going to be the main focus. I had no choice. So.
Well, I mean, you can still evasive maneuver and to get closer, and also, in certain circumstances, I should say. But the fighters are only as good as the carriers that they're based on, and you still have a fair number of TRs, lights. So you could basically, in the first pass, concentrate on destroying the carrier, so then they can't reload those drones once they're launched. Because bear in mind as well that FC does not allow drone transfer control, because that's one of the big things for seeking weapons in SFB.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, it's not even just for drones, but like we were talking about the Paravians last year. It's weird to say last year, but like the quantum wave torpedo, it's a self-guided seeking weapon, but it has no ECCM. So if you're fighting the Orion pirates, the Orions basically get their default stealth coating benefits against unguided quantum wave torpedoes, on top of whatever EW the Orion puts in. So there's a logic to a Paravian anti-pirate ship maintaining the seeking control, but so that they can basically loan the torpedoes, the ship's ECCM.
Yeah, so the quantum wave torpedo gets the benefit of the ship's EW.
Yeah, the quantum wave torpedoes are allowed to receive the same way that you can do the same thing with plasma torpedoes, but there's less of an onus with plasma torpedoes because plasma torpedoes have built-in ECCM, whereas the quantum wave torpedoes don't. So, but that's also a thing that they're missing in Flight Commander. So, like a Paravian, the preview was quantum wave torpedoes. Like they'll just have to make do against Orion ships with their stealth coating in terms of because there's not really the concept of ECCM there. So, so basically. And also, I don't believe that it's actually been said one way or the other whether or not carrier escorts can reload fighters in FC, because when escorts were brought into Fed Commander, they were pretty much divorced from their carriers. So in a sense, they're more like Omega escorts, because most Omega empires developed escorts independent. Like they basically would use them as like squadron support ships, not least because with the exception of the Drex, most Omega empires didn't develop any form of Aegis until the Y190s. So it was only really like the Federal Republic that stuck to the Alpha Octant standard of keeping your escort close to your carrier. But so in a sense, like because of the main thing for Alpha Fed Commander is that when escorts were introduced, the version of Aegis fire control that they were given basically allowed them to assist with the defensive fire of a ship within its radius,
Right.
if it was being targeted by seeking weapons. So, but it was not, because even for the hydrants, I don't believe that a hydrant carrier, a hydrant escort rather, is actually able to take another ship's. Actually, I'm trying to think now, because the hydrants are a unique case, because I guess when you think about it, a Stinger, because it's an energy-based weapon, the fusion beam, maybe it could be armed by another ship. But, anyway, so that's what I'm trying to get at is that, let's say it's a few years from now, and Fighter's Attack is being released as a product, and somebody has a Federation strike carrier or whatever, and they happen to have a Federation escort ship as well. I wouldn't be surprised if the rules by then made it clear that the escorts cannot take that fighter into its shuttle bay and reload its drones. So that there is basically subtracting some of the flexibility that the SFB escort version of that escort has, because they're designed to basically do two separate things, if that makes sense. So I kind of like, there's probably going to be more like nuance that can be cooked into the game system, like into the rules rather, to try to mitigate some of these issues and so on. So, but I mean, I'm not saying not to discuss it. I'm just saying that it's good to maybe post it in the BBS, beyond the BBS, but just try to bear in mind that there's probably going to be a ways to go before we get there. So hopefully things will improve, especially with ADB, with the medical situation, like with SPP and everyone on the team, to make sure that they all survive and succeed, and that things are in a position where. But the other thing as well is that even now, there's various, like, over the last few months, like in the time that the FC and SFB battle groups were posted up, the pace of operations at ADB is still not quite 100% as it was before things happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, else, because I mean, like, that's actually what raised interesting questions when it comes to when Captain's Log, because in the before time, there would usually be like a 3 or 4 week rush, like a development period, where many things would be done all at once to try to get the Captain's Log issue done. But we'll have to see what that's going to look like going forward. So, because maybe it'll be more of an extended product. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm speculating unfairly, because it's not my place to. But so I kind of, I mean, I think that there's definitely time, but to try and get some playtesting in, because I think if playtesting reports do come up, do basically generate the kind of like data to say, there's still too many drones on the table, and when even with the swarm and flight rules, and even with a limited number of carriers on either side, that might basically help make the case more for tweaking or adjusting things, or scaling things back and so forth, in terms of like maybe keeping it in borders of madness, or limiting the number of carriers that are allowed on either side, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, because the other thing too is that, like, even for gunboat attack, we're getting the gunboats, but we're not getting the gunboat tenders. So there's going to be no Sparrow Hockey. There's going to be no, I guess, Klingon D5P, or whatever you call it. So,
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily like the gunboats themselves. They're really basically casual boats. And so it might be a while. Like they talked about, maybe in booster packs or something, we might get a few of the mission variants. But it's not going to be the same thing as it is in SFB, even for those. So if you look forward in the future,
I'd be really surprised if we see ionic charge build up in Federation Commander gunboats.
Well, there's that too, because they've taken out the warp booster packs. But the other thing is, the other thing too is I don't think we're going to see things like space control ships or stellar domination ships.
Right.
For that matter, we're probably not going to see heavy carriers. So you're not going to see the Federation plumping down a carrier with 24 fighters on it, or with because we're definitely not going to see things like F-14s or F-111s, because the F-111 is not going to be showing up. They're going to give the Federation the Thunderbolt PF instead.
Right. The number of fighters is going to be very limited on per Empire basis. At least that's the feeling I got from the reading of the rules.
So it's basically it's not just a case of the fighters themselves being slimmed down. It's also about the platforms, i.e. the carriers, that are bringing them to the tabletop are going to be significantly scaled back, which is for the good, I should say, because I would very much be wary of seeing a large number of carriers showing up, unless it's for the Hivers or the soldier maybe. Although I will say I have absolutely no idea, Bill, how to think, because like in SFB, the soldier vampirism works by consuming the souls or the life energy of crew units. And since there are no crew units in Fed Commander, how is that going to work? Like, how are the soldiers going to function with Black Shark vampirism? So that's something that doesn't need to be worried about maybe for another 20 years, maybe 15 years or something. But so yeah.
Well, we need to learn to crawl before you worry about marathons.
Yeah, but so yeah, I mean, like I feel that in the broader sense of things, I wouldn't want people to lose track of the fact that FC, yes, it has its issues, but by and large, it's a robust game system. And again, I'm trying not to sound like I'm shilling for ADP here, but I mean, we're on a podcast for SFU On Call. Like, the gunboats look like they're going to function well, although of course, I think that is what people should be playtesting now. Get a hold of Captain Zog 54 and maybe try a few of the sample ship cards that are already up, or even wait till the PDF comes up, because it's probably not going to be a printed product for a long time. Try the Gunboats Attack PDF when it comes out. Try the rules, playtest them, post your reports, see how well they function, and really get a feel for those. That, I think, is basically a good way to see how things are going forward. And then, hopefully, once that's a success, then look at the X-chips into the game system. And of course, as we say, the X-chips are by default going to have a built-in limitation in terms of time period, because, if you're not playing a game before 2581, then you're not going to see any. So, or rather, in the quote-unquote X-chip era.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyone who sticks with Middle Years or early General War, FedCom, doesn't have to feel threatened by the presence of X-ships. But anyone who does want to try out the X-ships, then they'll be there to have fun with. And so once we get to the fighters attack thing, then not only will we be able to get a better sense of how well or not these drone issues are popping up, but we'll have a better sense of the context of those drones and those fighters are coming in, because if both sides have gunboats available and if both sides have X-ships available, then suddenly shooting down drones, it seems like less of an issue. Not least because even X-ships are not going to be getting Type 7 drones from SFB. They're getting Type 1 drones that only goes speed 32. So they're going to be much less dangerous drones than their SFB counterparts. And, in theory, you could basically say, all right, well, maybe gunboats, because, gunboats were a good anti-fighter measure in SFBs, but especially because there's lots of phaser variants. So you could basically say, all right, well, if the standard gunboats attack product does well, then can we please have a variant, a product, a booster pack with phaser variants, and keep those phaser variants in your back pocket, so that if somebody shows up with like a Klingon D7V, then just say, all right, well, here's 6 phaser gunboats, so good luck getting your drones through them. And then basically spend your scenario trying to kill the carrier. So, there's plenty of playtesting to be done. So
Agreed.
I guess I wouldn't reach panic stations too quickly.
No, I'm not panicking. And it's just that if the rules stay the way they currently are, that is my major concern. You know, because and again, you know, it's purely from the experience of creating tactics report for my battle group against a Klingon carrier, and you know, and then the multiple Klingon ships are going to be there, and the way I figured the scenario was going to go mainly is that the carrier was going to be in the back. It's going to be like a hex or 2 hexes back from the main group of the Klingons. So any time I want to actually attack the carrier, I have to go through the rest of the fleet to get to it. And that's why the one thing that I was hoping to do, and hopefully successfully do, is using the one and only displacement device that I have in all the ships that are there to actually attack, to displace the carrier, move it away from the rest of the battle group, so I can basically focus it as my point of attack. So instead of focusing on something else, then do that. And I've fortunately, given the number of ships that I have a good chance of. I'm gonna lose quite a few ships. I'm gonna be going through it, and it's gonna knock me out. But I think I have a good chance of winning overall at the end of the scenario. But anyhow, it's late. It's almost 11 o'clock, and I need to get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I have to get up in 6 hours. So I need.
Lord, we've kept you long. Maybe we've got to start starting these sooner.
No. What happened is Gary got here late and started talking, and that's what made us long. But anyhow, with that, we'll wrap it up, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure. Gary, you have a good night.
All right.
Thank you.
Doug, always a pleasure having you around. I will be seeing you on Sunday. So you have a good night.
Thanks for having me. Yep, see you then.
Jeff, stay safe out there. No driving off the side of the road, please.
All right.
Okay, see you. So, talked about a little bit about some Federation Commander history, and actually some Starfleet Battle Force history too. While we're at it, I didn't expect to do that, but I think that was actually a good place to start the evening, and that was actually quite delightful. And then we got to talk a little more about Federation Commander, not just some of the history, but also some of the products and some things that are coming up. The fighters attack, and of course gunboats attack. It's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. And X ships, of course, the big thing with Federation Commander, which Gary did not mention, which basically is that one of the goals of Federation Commander is to get rid of a lot of when it comes to those SFB ships, the variants, the partial variants, the partial refits, all that, so that each ship, as it stands, has all the refits that were available. So that was a way that ADB simplified those ships. It was just that, okay, all refits apply, boom, and so you have one ship. Now you still have variants, but you don't have all the partial refits and all that kind of thing, which is beautiful for Starfleet battles. It gives you quite, in my mind, a more realistic view of a fleet. Because depending upon where those ships were in, when it comes to getting what they've been doing and all that, they might have partial refits. They might have some might have refits, some of them don't. That is one of those parts of SFB that I like that kind of quote unquote realism. I think I quote that just because of it's a sci-fi game. It's based on a sci-fi, which still that's not really real. So anyhow, with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.